Is Shakespeare supposed to sound natural? This is a question I get asked a lot as a coach, and I'm going to guide you through the yes and the no of it. It is a little bit of a tricky subject, so I thought I'd do a whole video giving you the full picture, so if you're newer to Shakespeare, you can actually do a fabulous job straight away. And I want you to stick around to the end, because at the end, once we've picked it apart a little bit, I'm going to give you some really practical exercises, steps that you can take to make sure that you can start putting it into place straight away, because that's what we want, right? But before we jump in, just in case you don't know me, I am Sarah Gio. This is Shakespeare with Sarah, and my goal for you is that Shakespeare should feel really, really doable and actually fun, even if you're a complete beginner, because it can be so rewarding once you get to know how to perform Shakespeare, and it's really great training for actors for so many reasons. I have other videos talking about this, but let's jump in talking about natural Shakespeare. What even is it? Is it a thing? I don't know. Let's talk about it. Okay, so the first thing that we need to know to navigate these murky waters is that Shakespeare is heightened. It's considered heightened text or a heightened performance style. And what that means is that the text contains elements beyond the everyday, which essentially is usually the poetry, right? There's a lot of the figurative language in there, or the metaphors, rhetorical devices, but also there's archaic language in there as well, which also can make it feel quite different from everyday language. You also have the slightly bigger energy in Shakespeare. It's not supposed to be over the top. It's just that it has more physical and vocal energy, which is to do with the fact that it's often performed in larger spaces. So that is something that's adaptable as well. And if you want to go into more detail on that, I have a video about heightened and how we navigate that. I've got a bunch of videos on that actually. So I'll link stuff in the description for you as well. So you can always go a little deeper. But what we are doing is making sure that what we're performing sounds truthful. This is a big misconception, a big problem that a lot of newer actors have with Shakespeare, is that they think it's supposed to be really over the top. And that might be because maybe you saw a Shakespeare in the Park, for example, and it was really big and over the top because they're in an enormous space and it has to be big. Or maybe you watched a movie from the 1950s and they're going like this, right? But just, you need to know that Shakespeare has evolved as a form, and the goal now in current practice is that we are making it as truthful as possible, which is different from natural, which I'll talk about in a sec. But what I want you to think about for now is I want you to think about the fact that we're balancing three things. We're balancing meaning, so the sense in the story, making sure that the audience actually knows what's going on, right? Because it's not always that easy. Poetry, which is all of that figurative language stuff that I talked about before, which is a really big part of Shakespeare. It's very important. And truthfulness, right? So instead of thinking about making Shakespeare natural, I'd like you to think about making your performance truthful. You might think, that's just semantics, but I want you to think about, if I say natural to you, what do you immediately go towards? It's usually stuff like making it relaxed, making it conversational, right? That's often when I say natural, that's what people do. They kind of sit back, it's like they're in a coffee table. That's not going to work for Shakespeare, partly because we probably won't be able to hear you or see you, but also because we will then lose a lot of the beautiful poetry and all the stuff that's part of the style and part of the language. We don't want to lose that. We actually have to balance all of them. So we want to keep those things and add that truthfulness. So how do we do that, right? This is where it comes to those tips that I wanted to give you. I wanted to give you something very practical that you can do. So to get really truthful when it comes to Shakespeare, it's all about specificity. It's about character and character perspective and specificity. Good actors are always specific, right? You don't want to be playing an idea. You don't want to be playing a big emotion, right? Playing emotions and playing ideas it's always vague, it's always wishy-washy, it's very rarely believable, right? It doesn't ring true. So to get truthful with Shakespeare when things are very big, we have to get very specific about what it really means and how we feel about it, right? This is the key. So what it really means. So step number one, First thing I want you to do is I want you to translate or paraphrase the text into your own words. Now, you can look at something like Spark Notes or Lit Charts or any of those kinds of things, No Fear Shakespeare. They're a good place to start, but they're not enough. You need to really put it into your words, partly because that will help you connect to it. It'll also force you to make choices as you go through the process, because when it comes to putting it into your own words, there will be times where you go, oh, would I use that word? If I'm putting it into my words, would I use that word or that word? It could kind of be both. And that will help you get connected, but also get really, really, really clear about what you believe it means. The thing that I want you to understand in relation to this is that there's not just one meaning of Shakespeare. I think a lot of the time people think that, I need to translate Shakespeare into my own words and there's like a definitive translation somewhere. There's not. Just like if you were translating another language, there's so many ways you could put it into your own native language, right? There's always going to be heaps of different versions and you have to just kind of get close enough, but you also have to make choices. I think it means this, right? And that helps you become really, really specific. The other downside, by the way, of these online or No Fear Shakespeare and those kind of modern translations that are done for you is that they're not specific. They're actually summaries. They're not really kind of translations, like word by word translation. What they're doing is summarizing the idea of a sentence. And again, you can't play an idea. So those modern translation things, they're for students. They're not for actors. They won't serve you well enough. You have to go to the next level if you really want to be truthful, if you want to be good at this stuff. Now, of course, there's all practicalities about this. I mean, depending on how much time you have, you might not have time to translate every single thing, but you got to do your best, right? That's the number one thing. It's going to make a massive difference. I have a resource for this if you want to learn how to translate the way that I teach. It's very, very specific, of course, because I'm, on my soapbox about this. And I also have my Essentials Hub, which it gives you that lesson or those, that sort of mini course, but also it has a whole array of lessons to give you a really solid foundation. It's really, really affordable. So I'll link that in the description. I'd love you to join me in the Essentials Hub. So that's number one, your paraphrase. Number two is your character's point of view. When you get clear about how your character sees the world, it will really help you navigate those choices and come from a really specific place where you understand not just what it means, but also how you feel about it, your opinion on everything, which again is a really, really core element when it comes to acting generally, right? So even if you're doing contemporary acting, contemporary theater or TV or film or anything like that, you're thinking about, well, how do I feel about this? What's my opinion on what's going on right now, right? That gives you your perspective on everything. So to find that character point of view, the main way that your character sees the world, a worldview, that's really going to help you make choices. Partly it will help you make choices in your paraphrase, but it will help you make choices when you're just on stage listening, for example, or in between the lines if you're doing a monologue, right? It helps you see the world in a specific way, and you're very consistent about it. So to do that, simple thing you can do is just give your character a motto, right? And sometimes it's called a kinesthetic trigger, where you've got like a little phrase that kind of kicks you into the character. It can be anything, honestly. Sometimes I've had for characters things like everyone's being so ridiculous, like stuff like that, right? That kind of gives you an insight into how the character sees everything, right? And it also helps you connect. Simple, one sentence stuff, not a whole paragraph, one sentence that sums up and kickstarts that connection to the character. And you can say it before you run a monologue or before you work on a scene, or even just when you're wandering around rehearsing at home. And the biggest thing that you're going to need is time. When it comes to Shakespeare, you need time to go through this process so you can get it specific. It takes time to do the paraphrase. It takes time to read the play so you actually understand what your character's point of view is, right? You can't slack off when it comes to Shakespeare, which is another reason it's really great training ground, right? It makes you actually go through some sort of process. And if you don't have a process, that's why I created the Essentials Hub, because it's like, here you go. Here's a process. Here are steps to work through. So you can check out the description. I've got heaps of resources there. In fact, I'm going to link on screen that video about heightened text and performance styles because it's a really, really great insight into how you can navigate all sorts of heightened material, and it really makes you a better actor as well. So jump onto that one and I'll see you in the next video. So thank you for being here. See you soon.